No idea why this is locked in this fashion. So, good evening, everyone. Hope you all can see me. Let's have a look. Orientation lock. No. Hopefully, everyone can see me. Well, as I'm going live, I'll start. Thank you very much for being with me. You are through Independent News Media. I'd like to say thank you very much to those who've been with me for the whole year. There's 920 subscribers. I'm very absolutely pleased with that. I'm very humble in my thoughts that people will even listen to what I have to say. I've had 1,400 videos, some 257,000 views. So thank you very much. I'd like to go through the news of 2024 and some things that happened in 2025 and some predictions. So in 2024, the US Federal Reserve got hacked. They're not a federal organization, they're actually a private bank and they have no reserves, but only released the information in the 8th of December. So it's been quite some time, and they released the information in the holiday season thinking no one would notice. They were hacked through a third-party private company which does updates of software on their main computers. And this company was hacked, and then when they logged into the Federal Reserve, the hacking took place, and when they updated software, they did some management on the systems. Mexico, the Mexican government have now set up an app. This app is for the illegal Mexicans inside Mexico, so they can access the consulate and American lawyers. So the American lawyers can stop them from being deported for their illegal action of entering the United States and staying there illegally. This is because the Mexicans, who work cash in hand under the door, as it were, take the money and hand it back to their actual family members at home. It's now part of the actual Mexican economy, so they don't want that to go away. This is a disgraceful behaviour by the Mexican government. What else has happened? In the Christmas period, running up to Christmas, United Airlines and US Airlines had a computer glitch, or one might say is a hack. Both these aircraft companies had to ground their aircraft because their systems were down with a glitch, and they both claimed they had a software upgrade. Who would have a software upgrade in Christmas Eve? This is ridiculous behaviour. It's far too risky, and hundreds of thousands of people on both airlines were left without flights for at least 1 or 2 hours. Many people didn't actually get to fly. When the glitch was then fixed, quote unquote, the next batch of aircraft, they were already filled with Christmas people traveling. So the first batch of people, the few 100,000, maybe 500,000, they had nowhere to go, and unfortunately didn't get to fly to see their loved ones over the Christmas period. What else has been going on? The Ukrainians assassinated a Russian general, Igor Kirillov. This man was very important. He was responsible for the nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare defense of Russia, and he managed the defense regiments. What happened was the Ukrainians took a scooter bike, put explosives inside it, and when he came out of his home and walked past the scooter bike, which was parked next to his home, they remote detonated and blew him up. The Ukrainians then claimed they did it, and they released a video, and they had recorded this taking place. This is disgraceful behaviour, and it's technically an illegal act of war under the Geneva Convention. Elon Musk. Elon Musk is now backing Nigel Farage from Reform UK. This has made the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, go absolutely berserk. And he said this is gerrymandering in UK politics. But he himself was forgotten. He was gerrymandering in US politics by sending 100 Labour activists to assist Harris in door knocking up and down the United States, and between 50 to 100 cybersecurity specialists who could alter or modify or monitor people on social media and then fine-tune the Harris social media output to make sure that she would win the election, which was pointless at the end of the day, as we all know. The United States also are stating they're going to put $10 billion into farmers to help farmers. Now, on the surface, this sounds good, but however, this is unfortunate, but it's not going to the smaller farmer, it's going to the big boys. And the biggest boy in the United States is Bill Gates. And the second or third biggest boy is the Chinese government. So they're going to absorb this funding, these grants that are given out, $10 billion. And they will then make their farms even more efficient and even more commercially dangerous to the smaller farmer. The mid and small farmers are going to go bust. They can't compete with the level of Bill Gates and the Chinese government. Yes, that's correct. The Chinese government is one of the biggest landowners in the United States behind Bill Gates, either number 2 or number 3. So they are going to absorb this money from the US taxpayer. This is an absolute waste of money. FEMA has been given $30 billion to assist. And you think this is for Hurricane Helene and the other hurricane that was in the Florida area, but this is actually for the illegals who are arriving from the southern border, to fly them to the flyover states and then put them up in not hospitals, in hotels, to give them brand new clothes, 3 square meals a day, broadband internet in the hotels themselves, access to medical and optical requirements once a week, and to give them a mobile phone with limitless data and call plan, and also give them a cash card which gives them around about $50 every week to go spend on whatever they wish, which they only spend on alcohol and cigarettes. This is not good behavior. This is not what the US people deserve. What else has been going on? In the United States, in Wisconsin, at the Abundance Life Christian School, there was a shooting. A child came in, a 15-year-old girl came in with a gun to kill the Christians because she was so brainwashed by the lefty woke that it was better that she go kill them than allow them to live, so that no more, they couldn't go out there and become adults and then actually breed and have children of their own. Her idea was to kill all the children. Now, in that unfortunate incident, she also ended up dead. It isn't clear if school security or the police shot her dead, but unfortunately she too also died. She too is a victim because she was brainwashed by the lefties and the woke. This is an absolute disgrace, and unfortunately nobody from the woke or the lefties are going to be found guilty, and everyone points the finger at this child. This child was a 15-year-old girl and she was brainwashed. And there should be also recompense against the parents. What were the parents doing at the time? And if it was a single mother family, well, there you go. But I don't know this to be sure. It's only a rumor. But the parents, both the husband or the father certainly, and the mother, need to be investigated. What were they doing? And what was the grandmother doing and the grandparents doing? And what was the uncles and aunties doing? How did this child get to this point? The child had left a very detailed post on her social media saying that she was going to do this moments before she went and conducted this absolute savage attack. I'm very, very sorry for all who died, including this child. God bless them. The BBC is trying to cancel, pushing the cancel culture through the UK government to Stephen Bartlett. He's a podcaster of the Diary of a CEO. He has 9 million subscribers and 600 million views. That's a few more than myself, but don't worry, I'm getting there. He's influential because he allows people to come and speak. So STEM, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and people involved in social sciences themselves are allowed to come on and just say what they've found or what they believe. Now, he doesn't say these things are correct or true. It's for the individual to then make up their mind if they believe or not. But the government wants that gone, and the BBC now has disgraceful footage out there trying to push out that he's pushing out misinformation and disinformation. Again, who is the Ministry of Information? Surely not the BBC and the government. As we know, they've told lies throughout the 3 years of COVID, lockdown 1, 2 and 3, and even afterwards try to cover up the amount of deaths, because we had 863,000 people die from the jabs, and only 40,000 people died from actual COVID itself. So we now know that the jabs were no good, and the government had to then set up a jab payment plan to say sorry for all the loved ones they killed, and they give you £120,000 compensation. That's it. It's a miserable amount of money, and a lot less if it's yourself, and that if you are permanently injured forever, which is disgraceful. Syria, well, Syria's collapsed. Unfortunately, it was pushed by the Turks at one end, the US government at the other end, the UK government at the other end, and Israel coming in from the other direction. It should be noted that the chap who's been favoured the most, HST, has now owns or runs the three main areas. So runs the actual main Damascus, the capital itself, Homs, and Aleppo. And so they're sort of backed by the Americans, a little bit backed by the Turks, and they've had some assistance by the British, and the Israelis don't seem to like them at all. The Israelis have provided 600 or 700 bombing runs and bombed most of the country infrastructure to pieces, especially around the Damascus area, and also any offensive military capability, for example, tanks and air defense. The Israelis are now further pushing forward from the Golan Heights and coming in towards the Damascus area. They're some 20 to 30 kilometers away from Damascus itself. It's possible they may enter Damascus and take the country, because officially, according to the UN, if you do take the capital city, you have taken the country, and the country has fallen. It'll be interesting to see what the Israeli government does, but they are deeply, deeply into the country and have taken large amounts of ground with armoured personnel carriers and tanks. It should be noted in the north, the northern bit is actually under Kurdish control, and they call themselves Kurdistan, and they have a traditional Kurdish name. And in the northern section, now that they've done their bit to help get rid of Assad, the Turks are now bombing them. Previously, Turks were giving them weapons. It should also be noted on the western front, western side part of the northern bit of Kurdistan is where the oil rigs are, and the oil not in donkeys. And so, because the oil has been pumped out of there are now some 2,000 US troops protecting the oil fields from Turkey themselves and the Israelis and even the UK. It's, as far as they're concerned, they're helping the Kurds keep the control, but that means the Kurds have done a deal with the Americans to pump the oil out. It's a horrendous way. And in the center of Syria, the nomadic people are fighting each other for the lands and certain traditional paths. These paths past oases, and it's for grazing of and drinking water for their cattle, which could be camels or it could be goats. But this is a major thing. If you're a nomadic people and you've got hundreds, if not thousands of goats and camels, you need to have the correct direction and route and access to the oasis to keep the animals alive. It's a disgrace. The country's collapsed, and highly likely the country will be in three. So HST will control the cities. The northern bit will become Kurdistan, and the central bit will be split between the nomadic tribes. Absolute disgrace. This could have been stopped, but the US and the Turks did this mainly, and the UK came along later for a ride to get access to oil rights. The French government collapsed over the recent period. So Michel Barnier had a vote of no confidence, and he was rubbish when he was in the EU as an EU minister, and he was absolutely ruthless and rubbish whilst being in charge of France. So he gave his resignation to Macron, the president, and the government duly collapsed, and there are now going to be fresh elections. He thought he could continue like he was when he was in the EU, to be ruthless, and he thought that people would just take it lying down. Well, the French people are very much vocal, very much about protesting over even the smallest things. So when this extremist was trying to force things through and ruin their lives and make their lives poorer and more expensive, the French people rose up. There were lots of demonstrations. A lot of it was peaceful, but there were lots of demonstrations that became burning of cars and whatnot. And so he had to go. The pressure was too much. And then internally, the various members of government from the left-wing side and from the right-wing side, Le Pen's party, were proposing a vote of no confidence. It did take place, and he duly had to resign. US Air Force across the world. The US Air Force across the world has had drone attacks in their air bases. So here in the UK, in the area of Bedfordshire, is RAF Lakenheath, and there's a US Air Force base there. And the base commander was so worried that his aircraft would be damaged and destroyed. They've got the latest F-35 Raptors and the F-22s. These are the latest fifth generation aircraft. That he launched all his aircraft to get them in the air and then counterattack his own base. But by the time the aircraft took off and then turned around to fly back, the drones are actually gone. One of the drones is the size of a small family car, and the others are smaller drones. So it's thought that these may be some sort of reconnaissance, but the larger one was thought to be some sort of bomb, either a flying bomb or capable of dropping or releasing bombs. But fortunately I should say, it did not attack anything. So therefore, it's now thought that the larger one is some sort of reconnaissance vehicle, but with lots of sensors and computers. Therefore, it's a much larger size of a family car. UK NHS, the UK famous children's hospital, Alderhay in Liverpool, has had a cyber attack. They try to keep this quiet, but the patients' records of the children are missing because the information on the computers have been locked out. And so when parents come into the hospital, they're asked to sit down with the doctor or nurse and tell the doctor or nurse what they last remembered in the last consultation when they looked at the screen when the computers are working. Whatever they remember, the doctors and nurses are writing down on pieces of paper and then putting it next to a child, and that's how the patient records are being kept right now. This is actually a disgrace. You could imagine some of these children are terminally ill, and so the parents are stressed out. They don't remember what the last thing was discussed. They don't remember what the dosage of the different drugs were. They just come in and they see their child is dying. They spend time with their child and they go home for a bit and they rest, or to the hotel, they rest for a bit, and then they come back again. And so it's very distressing for these parents that the NHS cannot defend the smallest of things. That's their own data, and stop their servers from being hacked, and then stressing out parents who's already stressed out because their loved ones are dying. You are a disgrace, NHS. Grow up and do better. It should also be noted what's going on in Ukraine. Ukraine has had very large losses. They've been firing back to the Russians using American systems. So the long-range missiles from America and from the UK. Some of them have been quite detrimental. One of them took out a very large arms dump, I believe one of the largest arms dumps in the world, blowing up $2.5 billion worth of equipment. And so the Russians, who had already stated, if you mess about, they'll fire a nuclear missile in response in the NATO direction, duly did fire a nuclear missile, albeit without the warheads. And it hit into Ukraine and it took out a major command and control center. However, it should be noted, the British government has a nuclear detection center in Poland, and the Americans have their nuclear detection center in Romania, and they would have known within the first 15 to 20 seconds a nuclear missile had been launched. They wouldn't have known that there were nuclear warheads had been removed, and the UK government failed to tell the British people. They hid this, and they themselves went into their nuclear bunkers and hid for a whole day, just in case there was a nuclear missile launched with nuclear warheads. The Americans were the same. The Americans would have known in the first 15 to 20 seconds, 30 seconds at the most, because they're in Romania, their nuclear detection center, nuclear missile detection center, and they failed to tell the American people. And the American government went into their nuclear bunkers for a whole 24 hours, and then they emerged like nothing had happened. So if you look back on the news for those days, you will not hear any any MP or anyone of any stature of power in the United Kingdom or in the United States making any news reports, because they were hiding in bunkers with their families. Both of you governments, you're a disgrace. You're here to protect the people, and you failed in your duty. You protected yourself like cowards that you are, the snakes in the grass. In the other things going on in Ukraine, the UK government has stated they're sending 10,000, up to 10,000 troops into Ukraine in the south end of Ukraine for training of British troops. This is an absolute nonsense. You know full well if they're training in the south, then the next thing is to go forward to the middle and then into the north and fight Russia. This is a disgrace. I do not agree with this. As most of you are aware, I've served myself in the British Army, and I think this whole war is all about money and nothing to do with helping the Brits. Certainly the Ukrainians did this to themselves with the help of the Americans. And it should also be noted the French government is sending 25,000 troops to Romania to do training in Romania on the border of Ukraine. What is the purpose of sending 25,000 troops in January onwards? And by March, the whole 25,000 will be there for training. No one's sending 25,000 troops for training for nothing. The cost alone logistically is huge and the hundreds of millions of euros. And so this is a complete lie. This is only a forward deployment to then go into Ukraine and then go fight Russia. Same with the UK. The cost is huge. For 10,000 approximate soldiers, it's expensive. This is a lie. Highly likely this is going to be pushing people forward to go into the middle and then go fight the Russians. This is a very slow march into World War III, but it's just getting worse. Zelensky is losing severely, whilst he keeps on saying he's winning the war. If he's winning the war, why are not the Ukrainians in the UK going back to Ukraine? And same with them all over the world. If Zelensky is actually winning, why are they not going home? Interesting thought, nonetheless. The EU has been trying to conduct regime change in Georgia. Georgia, for those who are not familiar, is right next door to Russia. They've been funding them for over a year now, causing demonstrations to take place. And some of these demonstrations are now taking shape as violent riots. And so they're burning cars, burning shops, and doing all sorts to destabilize Georgia. And this is to destabilize Russia as part of their campaign to win the Ukraine war, which is unwinnable. The amount of Ukraine that's been destroyed, the amount of people that have died, is unwinnable. The US has put over $100 billion into Ukraine. This is a larger amount than most countries' economy. The UK has invested over 12 billion under the Tory parties and 3 billion under Starmer every year until the war is finished. It's unwinnable. They are on a losing streak. So when Trump does come in, we're looking forward to a cessation of activities. Moving on to Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. They had exploding devices sent by the Israeli government. These were in mobile phones, in two-way walkie-talkie radios, in laptops, computers, and in TVs, Wi-Fi routers. The Israeli government said they targeted Hamas and other terrorists. This is an absolute disgrace. They didn't target anybody. These devices were put out there, and civilians bought them in these 4 countries, and civilians died. And yes, there were members of politicians and leadership that were killed, but when someone's voted into power, you can't define them as a terrorist if they're voted into power. They are legitimate people who have been voted in using democratic means. And the Israelis just wanted to kill as many people, shock as many people. And so they didn't do this once, they did it twice. And each time it happened, they all happened at the exact same time. So these are predetermined killings of people. This is a breach of the Geneva Convention. However, it should be noted that the Israeli government is not signed up to the Geneva Convention. Therefore, they they think it's okay to go around blowing up individual people. Some people were killed and some people were maimed permanently. Those, for example, gentlemen who had their mobile phones in their pockets, um, their genitalia were blown off or permanently damaged, or their testicles were damaged, and so they are unable to father children. In other areas where the gentleman had it in their pocket, but on the left hand side, on their thigh, and their child was walking next to them, their child lost their face and lost their eyes and lost their ears and lost their nose and their mouth. It's not targeted anything. It did horrendous things to men, women, and children. And devices that were in people's hands, their fingers were blown up. People whose routers blew up, their Wi-Fi routers blew up, who were sitting next to their router, or people who were sat watching TV with their family when their TVs blew up. The blast fragmentation of plastic went into their faces, and they would have gone blind. So these things are not targeted. These things were wide-scale terrorist attacks on 4 countries on 2 separate occasions at the exact same time. I'm going to end the 2024 roundup with some good news. The good news is Donald Trump won the election. Thank goodness for that. Harris would have brought in new wars and printed more money and brought the world to its knees much more rapidly. We are in recession across the world and here in the UK. We are going to go into a depression and a crash, and I expect this to happen around about December 2025 and first quarter 2026. Trump being in power in that time will lessen the blow. He can't stop it. It's not going to stop. It is going to move forward, and we are going to have this crash. So I'm expecting a crash also in house pricing in Ukraine and across the planet. When I say a crash, I mean a 30% drop in house prices. This will absolutely bankrupt people here in the UK and across the planet, and especially in the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. But the good news is that Donald Trump is in power, and he will do something to cause the recovery to first start up in the US and then across the planet. God bless. 2025, what's happening, and some predictions. In the US, there's going to be a polar vortex in the southern states. Be prepared, not scared, according to Economic Ninja, or as the Proho will say, act accordingly. So please get some warm clothing, multiple layers that will keep you warm. Please buy some food and water and keep that for one side for at least 2 weeks. Be prepared for your pipes, your water pipes and your natural gas pipes to freeze over. Have some way to heat your home, a Mr. Buddy heater or some other propane or butane heater. Please have yourself a torch, what we call a torch in the UK, you will call a flashlight. Make sure you have 1 flashlight or torch per family member, and they're all the same type. Make sure you got 2 batteries per flashlight or torch, and make sure that you have a first aid kit or an IFAK. Please also make sure you've got some way of communicating with your loved ones. So if your mobile phone network goes down, you have some other way of communicating, or just even drive over to your loved ones and just check they're okay if they're elderly. And if they are elderly, buy some food and put some food away for them, tin food, and make sure they've got a tin opener. I know it sounds very silly, but a tin opener will be very, very useful in this time when this cold comes. Or better still, take that loved one that's slightly old and bring them into your home for 1 week or so. And when the weather gets better, then send them back home. Take care of your loved ones. Remember, no one's coming. If you're waiting for the government, you're only going to die. US milk shortage. US milk shortage. I predict there to be a US milk shortage in 2025. This is an advanced warning. The US government, in its wisdom, is now checking for bird flu. That's right, bird flu in cow's milk. So they're testing cows and the cow's milk at the farms in transit, i.e. on the lorries and the tanks, and in process. So, in process. So where all the milk is brought into very large tanks and then bottled or put into cartons. If they're using the PCR test, which is the test they use for CV-19, which is not a Five Nines regulated test. So if it's not Five Nines compatible, therefore it is not a proper test. In the UK and internationally, you have to be Five Nines error factor. So the accuracy is so good that you can rely upon it. The actual error is tiny. The US is using this PCR test, and so you can get false positives and false negatives and no test result at all. And they're just going by it like it's the gospel truth. And so if they find milk, or they test a cow or milk in a farm or in transit or in one of these major hubs where the milk is in larger tanks, they quarantine not just that milk, but the milk of all that, everything that's come from that farm and the complete farm itself. And so the farmer can't sell his milk and he can't sell his dairy cows either. And what will happen is eventually he'll go bust. This is another thing to push away natural foods and go to bug burgers and other highly processed GMO or GMS type foods. This is an absolute disgrace and disgusting. More natural the food, the better. Don't forget, God gave us these things and we should stick to what God gave us. My future in currency, I think cryptocurrency will be very big for 2025. My thoughts are the things that will shift policy and politics across the planet will be Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, XLM, Solana, Chainlink, and Aave, which is AAVE. If you keep an eye on these will fluctuate heavily. They'll go up and down massively. There'll be massive gains and massive losses, but they are being looked into by all sorts of people. So Bitcoin and Ethereum are by people who want to look at it as an asset class, although it is actually money as well. It can be spent across the planet. XRP and XLM are being used by major banks to use it as their digital form of currency to trade amongst themselves and to have various smart contracts. So these are very much used by the big banks, or certainly looking into the big banks. And Chainlink and Aave is being used for a similar thing as XRP and XLM, but by people who are in the digital sphere in finance, but not in the big banks. They started decentralized finance, and they are now in the digital era, setting up finance and banking and smart contracts, but away from the big boys. And so those not familiar, please have a look at Chainlink and Aave, AAVE. Google them and then go look at YouTube videos or Instagram videos or Rumble videos and have a look at why they're important. But these will impact everyone's lives in the future. The EU and the gas. The gas has now been switched off. It should be noted that the EU gets 15 billion cubic meters of gas from Russia, and it comes through Ukraine. So although there's a war on, the Ukrainians allowed the gas pipes to allow gas through into the EU, and this has been going on for throughout the years. From 2019, there's been a contract which has now just recently gone out of contract, and so the EU has stated that they wish to continue, but Zelensky has decided he doesn't wish to continue at all. And so now he's decided the contract's come to an end, he's going to stop the gas flow. This is to the great distress of the EU countries. And it should be noted that the EU will run out of gas at some point at the end of February. So technically winter will be over, but some of the EU countries who are eastward, more towards the Russian sector, East European countries, their period of winter will still stretch into March. So they could have snow and be in the minus figures. And so they need the gas. They'll technically run out of gas, but the Western European countries will unfortunately run out of gas and not be able to start to produce things. So Germany, for example, whose production, high quality production, is based around cheap gas, they're stopping production. Their car plants themselves will have to reduce to 1 or 2 days working and send their men home. There's no other way to continue because there isn't enough gas coming from other sources. The alternative way to bring gas is by ship from the United States. Now, they will need 6,000 ships a day to keep the EU going to get this 15 billion cubic meters of gas per year. There are only 600 tanking ships that bring gas that exist in the planet, and some of them are coming to the UK. And so there aren't enough around in the world, and there aren't enough going into the EU. So there's going to be a big problem. I expect there to be the gas prices will rise rapidly in the Western European Union countries and in the UK and also in other countries across the planet. It should also be noted the gas that's not going to be sold by Russia, they will take a hit initially and then they'll redistribute this gas to the BRICS nations. And it should be noted that BRICS nations is now 140 countries. It's the same size as the Commonwealth of the United Kingdom, albeit these countries, when they become a member or an associate member or a friendly country, they have to hand back the US dollar. Pushing back the US dollar means that the US dollar goes back to the US and inflation US then rises. It should be noted the inflation is something horrendous. It's unclear to me what it is, but it's certainly not 3 or 4%. In the UK, inflation is around about 20-21% for anyone who's been into a shopping centre or supermarket. But the UK government says it's around about 4% or a bit more. This is the absolute fiction of their imagination. Poland, starting in January, February, will provide shooting, as in firearms training, to school children. This is an absolute disgrace. Now, as a person who shot many times in the army and who shot in shooting teams of both my regiments, I enjoy shooting, and every man should shoot, and every man should teach his son. But the men should know when their son is ready and capable, and only the fathers are experts of their son, and only the fathers should be training their children. No school should be teaching any child how to shoot. This is an absolute disgrace. The state doesn't know if the child is stable and ready able to fire, and I certainly wouldn't be teaching any girls. Girls should be playing with their dolls. This is an absolute disgrace. Hybrid attacks. NATO and Russia have been giving hybrid attacks to each other, destroying each other's war factories, whilst not killing the civilians who work there. So there have been mysterious fires catching fire here in the UK, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, Portugal, even in the United States, Canada, Australia, to destroy the war factory capabilities to deliver less equipment to Ukraine. And obviously NATO countries are doing the same back to Russia. And so this has been a disgrace. But at least there have not been many deaths, very few, if any. But these mysterious fires continue. At the same time, there are also mysterious cyber attacks attacking various sub-suppliers and various smaller companies that are assisting the war factory companies. Right, I'm now finished with my predictions for this year coming. I want to talk about off-grid communication. Now, it should be noted that off-grid communication has now become massive in the UK and across the planet. And there's something called Meshtastic, LoRa Meshtastic, long-range radio. Now, this is a Meshtastic radio or a node. So this is the aerial, and it has a battery on the back, as you can see. So it's fully off-grid, and you can see messages, and it shows a direction and distance from the next device. These devices connect to another device, and when they are in range with another device, you have a telephone app on your mobile phone. It then tells you you're in range with another device, and you can send, at the basic level, text messages to each other in a very secure fashion using 256-bit key encryption. It should be noted, in the United Kingdom, this is a massive hobby. People communicating off-grid without the mobile phone network itself, but using the app and this device as the actual base station. This has a range of about half a mile in built-up areas, and in flat ground over a mile. If you're on a hilly ground, you can get 4 or 5 miles. In the London area and the south, there's over 100 people connected to each other, and similarly in Manchester there's over 100 people connected, and across into the EU there's thousands of users. Across into the United States there's 1,000+ users. This is becoming very important. People are now communicating without the government seeing what they're doing and what they're saying. These people are normal people, law abiding, they just want to communicate in privacy. So this is a way forward. Laura Meshtastic. Right, that is the end of today's broadcast. I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast. I hope to see you, well, I hope you'd see me in the future. If you have anything to say, please provide comments. I've got a comment from April. Hi, thank you for your work throughout the year. This is very appreciated by the way you are vertical on the screen. No matter, have a great year. Thank you very much, April. God bless. God bless your families. Thank you very much for everyone who's watched. I wish you well and a happy new year. Like, subscribe and share now on Telegram.